Ezrael. Ezrael is the angel of death in Islam, who is in charge of taking the life of every living being when the time comes. This task is done at the command of God, and Israel has no will of his own other than to carry out God's command. This angel is not explicitly identified in all Quranic verses, but is mentioned in some Islamic texts as Malak Hamet. He is thought to have a book that records the time of death of every living being, and when the time comes, their names are erased from the book. In Islamic tradition, the process of taking life is described in detail, with Ezrael taking the lives of the faithful with gentleness and compassion, while for those who disobey, the taking of life is done more harshly. After the lives are taken, he escorts the spirits to the beyond, where they await the day of judgment. There, the final fate of each individual will be determined, whether they will go to heaven or hell based on their deeds during their life on earth. The relevant religious text mentions the role of Ezrael in Quran Surah As-Sajdah verse 11 say, "The angel of death who is charged with your death will kill you, then only to your Lord will you be returned." Malak Hamet. Malak Hamet is the angel of death in Judaism. This figure is regarded as God's agent in charge of taking the lives of humans when their time on earth comes to an end. Jewish texts, particularly in the Talmud and Midrash, hint that Malak Hamet acts as the final executor of God's will. In Talmud Bavli, Avodah Zarah 20b, it is stated that the angel of death can only carry out his duties with God's permission. The angel of death will come, but only with God's permission can he carry out his task. The Malak Hamet is not considered an evil entity, but rather a carrier of the transition from the material world to the spiritual world. He is the manifestation of an important role in the cycle of life and death, acting in accordance with God's justice and mercy. In some interpretations, Malak Hamet is also depicted as an angel equipped with a sword dripping with poison, which is used to take the lives of people who are destined to die. The angel of death. In the Christian tradition, the concept of the angel of death is not as clearly defined as in Islam or Judaism, but there is a figure who plays a similar role in the task of bringing departed souls before God. This angel of death is often associated with Michael, one of the archangels who is considered the defender of humanity and the bearer of souls to heaven at the time of death. In Christian tradition, death is considered a transition to eternal life, and angels play a role in assisting the spirit's journey to God's judgment. One reference to the role of the angel of death in the biblical text is in Revelation chapter 14, verse 9, where it describes an angel reaping the produce of the earth with his sickle, a symbolism that can be understood as the act of taking life. Then the angel swung his sickle over the earth and harvested the grapes of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. Yama. Yama is the Hindu god of death who rules the underworld or Yamaloka and acts as a judge for the departed souls. He is considered the Lord of Dharma who judges people's deeds and sins after death to determine their fate in the next life. Yama holds a record of every deed done by individuals during their lives and gives just decisions based on the law of karma. In Hindu sacred texts, such as the Rig Veda, Yama is referred to as the first person to take the path to death and become the ruler of the world of the dead. Yama, who first traveled the path to righteousness, will lead us to the peaceful place of our ancestors. Yama is often depicted riding a buffalo-drawn chariot with a sinister figure, carrying a mace and rope to capture spirits. Yama's role in Hinduism is not only as a punisher, but also as a regulator of the cycle of life, death, and reincarnation. After souls die, they are brought by Yama's messenger, called Yamaduta, into his presence to be judged. Based on their deeds, these souls may be sent to heaven, Svarga, or hell, Naraka, or reborn in a life form that suits their karma. Yama is also associated with the concept of time and the finitude of life, reminding humans that death is an integral part of the cycle of samsara, rebirth. As the god of justice, Yama ensures that every soul receives the appropriate outcome according to their deeds. Anubis. Anubis was the god of death and embalming in ancient Egyptian mythology, who played an important role in the spirit's journey to the afterlife. He is often depicted with the head of a wolf or dog, which is a symbol of respect for the animal's role in watching over the tomb. Anubis had the responsibility of protecting the tombs of the dead, leading the mummification process, as well as guiding the soul of the deceased on its journey to the afterlife. Anubis plays an important role in the weighing of the heart ritual, a ceremony that determines the fate of the spirit in the afterlife. In this ceremony, the heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart is lighter than the feather, then the soul is considered pure and allowed to enter heaven, or field of reeds. Conversely, if the heart is heavier due to sin, then the soul will be eaten by the soul-eating goddess Ammit. An important text related to Anubis comes from the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and rituals that help the dead on their way to the afterlife. In this text, Anubis is the ritual leader. Anubis will lead the soul in the weighing of hearts, guiding the spirit towards the court of Osiris to ensure a peaceful eternal life or destruction. Thanatos. Thanatos is the personification of peaceful death in ancient Greek mythology. He is a god who symbolizes a calm and non-violent death in contrast to gods more associated with violence or warfare such as Ares. Thanatos is often depicted as a black-winged figure who carries human souls gently into the realm of the dead. He is the son of the night goddess Nyx and twin brother of Hypnos, the god of sleep, which reinforces the connection between sleep and death in ancient Greek understanding. Thanatos is described as an inescapable yet calm god. He is not feared like other more aggressive gods, as his duties focus more on a natural and peaceful death. However, in some stories, he was also defeated by heroes like Hercules who sought to prevent the death of their loved ones. In Hesiod's Theogony, Thanatos is mentioned as one of the children of Nyx. And after her there was born Thanatos, the death without sorrow, with his brother Hypnos, the god of sleep. Mictacatzihuatl. Mictacatzihuatl is a goddess of death in Aztec mythology known as the Queen of Mictlan, the underworld where the souls of the dead reside. Along with her husband, Mictlantecutli, she ruled Mictlan and was responsible for watching over the bones of the dead and keeping the spirits well-traveled through the underworld. Mictacatzihuatl is often depicted as a sinister female figure, with a skull for a face and attributes associated with death, such as snakes and symbols of the underworld. Mictacatzihuatl plays an important role in Aztec rituals and beliefs about the afterlife. After a person dies, their soul is believed to have to undergo a long and perilous journey through the 9 levels of Mictlan before reaching eternal peace. As the ruler of the underworld, Mictacatzihuatl helps guard the bones and spirits, ensuring they reach their final destination. Ancient Aztec texts, such as the Codex Borgia, provide descriptions of how Mictacatzihuatl watches over the underworld and guards the spirits of the dead. He was also believed to be involved in festivals that honored the dead, which later developed into the Mexican tradition of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, a celebration that honors ancestors and the dead. Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is a personification of death that appears in European folklore, especially during the Black Plague era in the 14th century. This figure is depicted as a skeletal figure wearing a black robe with a hood, holding a large scythe with which he reaps human souls like a farmer cutting crops. The Grim Reaper is not a god, but a symbol of man's helplessness towards the inevitability of death. In folklore, the Grim Reaper appears to take a person's soul at the moment of death and guide them to the afterlife. Although he is often depicted as a terrifying figure, his role is not always negative. He is regarded as a bearer of destiny, who is only carrying out the natural task of life, which is to end life in the physical world. In some stories, the Grim Reaper can give people a chance to make amends or even delay death through games or negotiations, as seen in Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, where a knight plays chess against the Grim Reaper to delay his death. Shinigami. Shinigami are gods or spirits of death in Japanese mythology who are tasked with guiding the souls of the deceased to the afterlife. The concept of Shinigami emerged relatively recently compared to death entities from other cultures, especially during the Edo period. Shinigami are not absolutely feared, but are regarded as spirit guides who ensure the death process goes well, similar to the concept of psychopomps in other cultures. In many interpretations, Shinigami do not act as killers, but rather simply guide spirits whose time has come to leave this world. The role is more administrative or supervisory. Shinigami ensure that the balance between the world of the living and the dead is maintained, and that spirits do not stray between the two worlds. In some folklore, there are stories where Shinigami may come to retrieve the wrong person, showing another side of the myth where death entities can err. Although there are not many classical texts that explicitly mention Shinigami, its influence is becoming more visible in Japanese literature, theater, and popular culture. For example, in kabuki stories such as Shinigami, Shinigami are portrayed as spirits that lead humans to death due to greed or sin. Morana. Morana is the goddess of death, winter, and regeneration in Slavic mythology. She represents the end of life and the beginning of a new cycle of nature. Morana is often associated with harsh winter and darkness, symbolizing death and destruction, but on the other hand, she is also associated with rebirth and spring. As the goddess of death, Morana is not only regarded as the bringer of death, but also as a symbol of transformation and the eternal cycle of nature. In Slavic culture, Morana is depicted as a beautiful yet sinister woman who transforms into a terrifying creature when winter sets in. Every year, as winter begins to draw to a close, Slavic people will perform a ceremony to kill or banish Morana, symbolically marking the end of winter and the arrival of a new spring. This ceremony usually involves making a straw doll representing Morana, which is then burned or thrown into the river to drive her out of the village. Morana's role in Slavic mythology is not only as a terrifying figure, but also as a reminder that death is part of the cycle of life that everyone must face. In some interpretations, Morana is a goddess who brings not only physical death, but also the symbolic death of old and obsolete things, making room for rebirth and renewal. Morana is a goddess who reminds people of their inability to avoid death, but also of the hope for regeneration and new life after the end of winter.